versus the others. And that's it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. We will wait for 1 more minute for other people to join the webinar. So we will be back to you in a minute.
In case you have any technical difficulties or anything, feel free to put it in the chat. Normally everything should work.
Yep. Okay. Let's start. So welcome everybody to the CRM webinar of Flexcity. It's one of the several webinars around this topic that we already did in the past years. Today we will speak about CRM, the basic concepts, capacity remuneration mechanism, and also about what's different this year from other years and who can participate and how Flexcity will guide you through this. So today I'm joined by our country manager, Jules Ayer, and Pierre Lippens, our portfolio manager and CRM expert. And the two of them will guide you through the details and the overview of everything concerning CRM and what it can mean for you as a company or as a technology operator. So Flexcity, who are we? So many of you know us already. We are an energy technology company. We exist since 2013, so we already have over a decade of experience in demand-side response, aggregation of large industrial technologies. Nowadays, batteries are also an important part of our portfolio. We optimize assets that are very small, from a few kilowatts, so very small batteries, for example, up to power plants, like gas-fired power plants of more than 250 megawatts, and everything in between. CRM is an initiative by the Belgian government that has been launched in 2021. Flexcity was participating from the start, and we also managed to pre-qualify over 630 megawatts of flexible volume since then, which is very nice because we partner with our industrial clients. Mostly it is demand-side response, meaning that we actively, together with our partners, try to minimize the need for large new gas-fired power plants to be installed in Belgium, which will reduce the cost of having a good security of electricity supply in Belgium. So Flexcity, most of you know us from Belgium, since we're talking about the Belgian capacity remuneration market today, but we are also equally active in the Netherlands, in France. We are active in Italy, where the market on flexibility is opening up in the past months and coming months. We're also active in Spain, and since the beginning of this year, Flexcity has also officially opened its first office in London, in the UK. So very quickly, what we will discuss today, we will talk for 30 minutes about the CRM system, and then we will leave room for 15 minutes of questions. So that means that at 11:45, we should be able to close the session. The session is recorded and will be sent to everyone who registered today. So if you're not able to attend to the end, you can always rewatch the recording. Then you will see that there is a tab Q&A in this interface, and that one you can use to write your questions. So we really encourage you to write your questions as they come up in your mind. And then at 15 minutes after our talk, we will select the questions, a few questions that we will answer. Yeah. So we will start by giving a broad overview of CRM, then go through the auction process, go through the market updates compared to the last years. We will give you our recommendations and guidelines on how you can concretely start your application for the CRM process, and what steps you'll have to follow, and then we will finish by the Q&A. So in all these things, you will also get an idea of how much you could earn based on the technology that you are familiar with or operating. So it's going maybe a bit different for genset than for a CHP or a battery, and so on and so forth. I will finish my introduction by just saying or highlighting what has changed this year compared to the last years. So there has been the introduction of a new auction, a year -2 auction, which means that you can this year apply to participate in the auction of 2027. That is on top of the year -1 auction, so participating this year for 2026, and the year -4 auction, which is then for you participate now for the delivery time in 4 years. The payback obligation exemption for demand-side response and batteries, that's a very big change that we are very happy about, because Flexcity lobbied a lot for this as well. So that means basically that as a consumption asset, electrical consumption asset or a battery, you're no longer exposed to price risks, let's say, that occurred with the rules of CRM last year. So that has been changed. We're very happy about it, as I said. And then finally, there might be a possibility to secure multi-year contracts for existing assets. Previously, it was only for old to build assets, and this is not final yet. But Veolia has launched the possibility to also get it for existing assets. Voilà. Then I'll leave the floor now to the experts, Jules and Pierre. Thank you again for being here with us today.
Thank you very much, Kien. So if we take a step back and trying to understand what is CRM. So it stands for Capacity Remuneration Mechanism. And it's basically a subsidy to ensure that there is a national security of supply of electricity. And this was put in place in connection with the Belgian nuclear phase-out, and also, of course, to integrate more renewables into the energy mix. And it will help to compensate the owners of existing and future electrical capacity if they are actually available to produce more or consume less during specific stress period. And Pierre, you will explain to us this missing money explanation.
Yes, thank you, Jules. So now you might wonder, like, why is the government handing out a subsidy? Why does the market itself not solve this issue? Well, that is typically a problem within electricity systems, is that these investment cases have to, or these new assets really have to capture revenues at certain moments in time. And often these moments in time are not long enough to capture enough revenues to cover your investment costs. So if we look at the left, there's this missing money problem that occurs where your costs are higher than your revenues. The revenues are from several markets, the long-term trading, the spot markets, ancillary services on which Flexcity is active. And what this subsidy does, it basically makes your investment case positive. It turns into a positive business case where your revenues are higher than your costs. That's basically the goal of the CRM mechanism here.
And now, you could, for sure.
So You might wonder how is it rewarded? How much remuneration can I get? Well, that typically depends on your nominal reference power, which you can take as your maximum power that you could potentially produce with your asset. And then you decide upon how much volume of that you want to bid into the market. The volume you decide not to bid in is the opt-out volume. So let's say you have a 10 megawatts battery, you decide to not bid in 1 megawatts for several reasons that might be. Then you end up with 9 megawatts. And then typically this volume that you want to bid in is derated. Now, what does this derating factor stand for? You can sort of see it as a reliability factor, especially if there's not a lot of wind, not a lot of sun, electricity demand is very high. Then you typically want to have assets that are reliable in these moments. So that the more reliable, the higher your derating factor. And for a battery like this, it would be around 50%. So then your 9 megawatts, you do it times 50%. And then you end up with the actual volume that you can get into the market and get remunerated for.
And to go a bit further in this, so this is just a list of assets that are usually participating in CRM. And the main rules are that you need at least 1 megawatt of derated power. You need also for the asset not to receive already variable subsidies, such as green certificates is the main example in Belgium. And there is a CO2 emission limit, which removes some types of fuels like diesel. So if you look at the emergency generator, the derating factor is 91% if your asset can run for 12 hours. And because of that CO2 limits, then the diesel cannot be used. However, you can use HVO fuel or biodiesel. And CRM can actually help you to pay for the extra cost of using that fuel. And then for the other assets, as Pierre mentioned, so the higher the reliability of your asset, the higher the derating factor. And so the more you can put your asset into the CRM. For batteries that have a lower capacity, you can see it's usually between 30% up to 50%. And for demand side management, it also depends on how long your asset can stop consuming in these. Then you might have known, of course, that sometimes you have to participate to the CRM. So the pre-qualification can be mandatory, and it's mandatory to pre-qualify for existing units that are production or storage capacity that are above 1 megawatt of derated power, and also for new units that have an existing permit or already a signed connection contract. Now, for the assets that don't have to pre-qualify, so usually units that already receive green certificates, demand side management, so assets that consume, new units without a permit, and generators on island modes, you don't have to pre-qualify. But note that if you have to pre-qualify, that's not necessarily that you have to participate to the auction and to the CRM activations. There's something that's called the fast track procedure that allows the participants to skip the auction even though they have to pre-qualify. We don't advise you to do the fast track procedure. Just first consider the rest of this presentation and what you can gain from participating before you click this. Now, when can you participate? So this is the timeline of the different, what happens during each year of the CRM. So in the dark blue tiles, you see the delivery periods. This year in 2025, we have the first delivery period that will start in November. And then in 2025, in the middle, you can also see that there is a year -1 auction and the new year -2 auctions for 2027 as Lynn presented. We can also participate in the year -4 auction for the delivery period in 2029. And then Pierre will tell you about how much we can get from these.
Yes, so the maximum revenue that you can get depends on each auction. As previously mentioned by Jules, there are 3 auctions. And then there's a separation between existing capacity and new capacity. Typically for existing capacity to be present or to refurbish or upgrade your capacity, it typically takes less euros than building new capacity. So therefore an intermediate price cap was introduced. As you can tell here on the slide, it's 21, 26 and 24K for respectively year -1, year -2 and year -4. Now for new capacity, so if you want to build an entirely new asset, then it's typically a lot higher, 2 to 3 times higher. Last year it was at 77K. The numbers are supposed to be released by now by the government, but they have not been yet. So we're waiting on them, but we'll make sure to update the slides when we send them to you with the relevant potential revenues that you can gain by bidding in new capacity. And maybe important to mention that these are typically multiplied by your derated power, so not your nominal reference power. Now, of course, this sounds nice, all these revenues, but then of course there are some obligations to it. Now, what are these obligations? The obligation is that you have to be present in the market and you have to participate in the market. Now, when do you have to participate? It was decided that a price signal is the most technology neutral, clear market signal that there is scarcity. So these moments typically occur, again, when it's cold, dark, not a lot of renewables during winter. And that's when the day-ahead price spikes usually, especially during the evening when everybody gets home. So therefore, a strike price was introduced. This strike price is set and calculated by Veolia. Last year it was around 413. We do not know the one this year yet. And so if the day-ahead price goes above this 413 euros, you are expected to participate into the markets. So let's take the example here between 6 and 8 in the evening, where we can see that the day-ahead price is higher than the strike price. Then we typically have an AMT moment, an availability monitoring triggered moment, is the official name for these moments. Maybe an example will make it a bit more clear. So let's say you have an emergency generator. These are not typically offered in the day-ahead market, or they are really there for reliability purposes. But let's say you bid in the emergency generator into the day-ahead market, into the CRM market, and then you are expected to activate and produce volume. So you go from standby to production between 6 and 8. You know this a day in advance, as the day-ahead clears a day in advance. And the activation itself, you have to turn it on yourself, but Flexcity is well positioned to automate this for you. But what if you have a CHP that is already at its full production? Do you then not participate in the CRM since you already participate in the typically in the day-ahead markets? No, that is not the case. Again, you just have to be present in the market. So if you're already producing, you just run as is and you just keep your production at a minimum of the volume that you bid into the market. Then the last example, as mentioned by Lien, we have a lot of demand-side response. These are typically very interesting assets to participate with because if the day-ahead price is high, you normally wouldn't participate either, or not as much in the day-ahead markets. So then you have to decrease your consumption again from 6 to 8 when there is this AMT moment. And again, you know this a day in advance. Now, let's say you are a client at an aggregator like Flexcity. You are already contracted in ancillary services, that is FCR, AFR, or MFR. These markets clear before the day ahead, so you do not know if you will have to be present for CRM yet. Then Veolia took this into account, and you will not have to respond to signals. If we look on the left part of the slide here, if you're already selected in ancillary services, then you only respond to the FCR, AFR, or MFR activations. But let's say you are not selected in these markets, then you have to participate and respond to CRM signals if your day-ahead price is higher than your declared market price or cost to run, as it's defined here. Again, this is something that Flexcity will entirely take into account for you, so there's no need to check your capacity every morning as well as the day ahead every day. We are well positioned to automate this for you.
And now about more the details of the auction process. So these are the types of assets that typically are participating. So we have the CHP or cogeneration, as we usually mention for. So that's production assets. The only requirements usually is that you don't get the green certificates anymore, and you need to pre-qualify in order for that asset to be participating. Then emergency generator, as I said before, you have to use biodiesel or HVO fuel and no diesel anymore because of the CO2 limitations for CRM. Then batteries, of course, can participate in CRM, and these revenues are added to any other revenues that the batteries would get on the day ahead or ancillary services. And demand side management clearly can participate too by stopping their consumption on specific times. Now, we asked you before you registered to this webinar which assets you were interested in. And so the clear winner is the CHP. So we're just going to show you the different revenues that you could get with the CHP. And when we share the slides, we will show you the extracts for other types of assets and other examples. So the CHP, Pierre, if you want to present us what you would earn.
Yeah. So let's say you have a CHP. Let's say it already exists. It's already built. It's in operation. And it's higher than 1 megawatt, because that's the condition on which to participate. And also that it does not receive any variable subsidies. Typically in Belgium, these are green certificates. That's something that CHPs often receive. And let's say it's 10 megawatts in reference power. Then the derating factor is applied. For CHP, it's 94%. Why? Because it's a reliable asset. It can be there when you request upon it. And then if we multiply that, we end up with a derated volume of 9.4 megawatts. Now, this volume, you decide to bid into the market. Let's say you do it in year -1. You want to participate just 1 year in advance. You do not want to commit 4 years for several reasons. Then last year, we had an average price of 15.7 thousand euros per derated megawatts. And in the end, this will result in a potential remuneration of 140,000 euros per year on top of your other market revenues. These other revenues could come from day ahead or AFRR markets where Flexcity actively participates in. So yeah, this is a very positive business case to participate, I would say.
And now for a bit of the market updates. So the highlights were presented by Lynn in the beginning, but I'll just go through them in details once again. So what's new this year? First of all, the introduction of the year -2 auctions. So you have more opportunities to participate for 1 delivery year. So you have 4 years in advance, 2 years in advance, and 1 year in advance. The second thing is the removal of the payback obligation for demand side management and batteries. So for assets that consume and for batteries, you don't have to pay back the revenues that you've generated because of the CRM on the day-ahead market. So this really helps demand side response and BESS assets to participate in CRM. And the third point is the multi-year contracts are now open for existing assets. Previously, it was only the case for new capacity that were eligible to sign a CRM for multi-year delivery periods. And now existing capacities can qualify for these contracts. So this allows you to lock in several years of CRM revenues with existing assets. Don't hesitate, I want to just remind you of this, to use the Q&A to ask any questions you might have on these new things or on the CRM in general. Now, Pierre can walk us through the different results that we had last year.
Yes. So last year we had the first year -1 auction. Why is that? Because 2025 is the first delivery period. It starts in November, to be more specific. And the auction obtained its goal. There was an oversupply, so security of supply was ensured. We saw that there was 3.1 gigawatts offered for a demand of 2.67 gigawatts. So we had 470 megawatts of excess supply. Of course, this has an impact on prices. This is something we also expected and we modeled well because we bid even above the weighted average price of 15.7k euros per year. Even and this is, of course, well below the price cap of 27.3k euros. So it does have an impact on prices. It's typically a bit of a trade-off because in year -4, as Jules will get into detail, prices are a bit higher. Why is that? Because it's more of a long-term commitment. You have less certainty on what the market conditions will be in the future. So depending on your risk appetite, you decide to bid into the year -1 or year -4. Now the year -4.
Yeah, so basically, year minus 4 is really undersubscribed. At the moment, there is, well, first of all, a higher price cap that you can participate in. Of course, this is there to be able to pay for a commitment in 4 years. So clearly, you have to receive a bit more money because of that commitment and responsibility. But in general, too, as we can see, like there was less contracted volume in total, and the price cap is higher. And if we look at the demand curve and what happened for the last year minus 4 CRM auction, well, this is the demand curve, and everything that fits into this shape was selected. And we can see on the right that above 700 of megawatts were missing, so that were not contracted, and so would have been given, of course, for CRM assets that would have been participating in here. So it's always more interesting to participate in year minus 4 if you have availabilities and you can commit to your asset being available for this auction. Now, the guidelines that we want to show you for your participation. So most important thing is the timeline of the auction. So every year the auctions happen. And every year, if there is one date that you need to remember, is that the June 15th is the deadline for the pre-qualification of assets. Because you need quite a bit of documents and administrative process, as well as making sure that the bidding process is understood by your company, we really want to advise you to start thinking about your participation soon and contact us if you have any questions for the pre-qualification, because this deadline has to be anticipated, and this is the only way that you can bid into the 3 auctions that are now like open for this year. Then the auction happens on the 1st of October. We receive the results 1 month later. And in the 1st of November, in 1 year, 2 years, or 4 years, you start having the delivery period where you need to change your production or consumption. The common pitfalls that we've observed in the past CRM process. So the first thing is lacking the identification of the opportunity of CRM. So basically people fast tracking if they have to pre-qualify, but just not looking at what it means because they just see it as an administrative process and not as a revenue stream for their assets. Second thing is missing document or submitting incomplete information for the pre-qualification, which concludes into like not being selected and not being able to participate in. Then, of course, the strategic bidding error, so putting a price for a wrong auction or wrong price that makes you either miss the auction or miss revenues for these. And in the future, because the first delivery period will start in November, clearly we will see some assets that are not responding to CRM signals because the automation is not prepared on site, and that will cause loss of revenues, of course. How can you prepare for the CRM? Well, there's 2 main things. The first point on the left is really be sure that you prepare the necessary documentation for the pre-qualification. So you need the relevant permits. If you need to ask for permits, this has to be done before the 15th of April as well. You need to compile information about the waiver of subsidies you might have to make sure that you can show to the Veolia that you don't have any variable subsidies at the moment. We need information about your CO2 emissions, as well as a grid user declaration. And then Veolia also asks for a financial guarantee to cover the potential penalties if you are not available to participate. And Flexcity actually provides this cover to customers that we already have and that are participating in current Flex services. So this can help, of course, if you don't want to freeze some money in the bank for that cover. Also, we want to put in place that, well, we want to highlight that we can, of course, help for 4 main things. So first of all, the strategic advising. So we can help you with deciding how much volume and at which price we think you should participate into the CRM. We can help you with the administrative process, so validate the documents and help you through the pre-qualification. We can, as Pierre mentioned, help you to follow the activation signals. So during the delivery period, making sure that your assets are responding. And if your assets are unavailable, we can find ways to cover these unavailabilities for the next day. And as I just said, we can provide you with CRM brand guarantees that are required by Veolia if you are already using your assets with Flexcity. And on top of this, of course, we can integrate your CRM participation with other flexibility services that I'm sure you are aware that Flexcity also provides. As a conclusion for the next steps, so 3 main things really. Have a look at the pre-qualification and contact us if you have any question. Bid and don't hesitate to participate in the CRM and not only following the fast track process. and then deliver, so making sure that you have an automation that Flexcity can do for you to make sure that you are delivering the correct activations and not being penalized to get all of your revenues for CRM. Last slide before we jump to a question. If you have to participate, don't fast track. I hope this is the main point that you remember for this if you have to. And if you don't have to participate in this CRM, let's discuss strategy and what makes sense for your assets and for your risk appetite for this market. So in any case, contact us at contact@flexcity.energy. And remember, once again, that the pre-qualification deadline is the 15th of June. And this requires quite a lot of time for both you and us to be sure that we can put you in. This was the presentation. Now we will jump to some of the questions that you've asked. Let me just open them. And if I sort them, so the first question from Alexandre is it a pay as bid or pay as cleared auction? So maybe Pierre, you want to take on this?
Yeah. So you have a lot of nice questions. Thank you for that. So indeed, you might have got it, but it is a pay as bid auction. Hence why I mentioned that Flexcity bid above average, because it's a pay as bid auction and it's cost minimizing, so to say. So it's just merit order based. First capacity that is the cheapest gets selected first. And that's the same for every auction. So for the year -1, 2, and 4.
And then second question, sorry, by Charles. So why is there an opt-out volume into the CRM market? Maybe Pierre too?
Yep. So the opt-out is really for several reasons. It's just the asset owner's decision on how much he wants to commit his volume to. It could be, let's take the example of a battery. You bid the battery in for the year -4, meaning that it will be available in 2029. By then, your battery might have degraded a bit, and therefore you lost a part of your volume, and you cannot commit for the full power to be able to deliver that in 2029. Or it could be that you have several CHPs combined that you bid in, of which you know that one of them most likely will not be present in the next 4 years. So it's for several reasons. It's really up to you to decide how much you bid in into the auction. Yeah.
And then a question from Luc. What is the derating factor typically for a BESS, so a battery? So this is really depending on the capacity of the battery and therefore on the capacity of the battery to participate into a long activation in CRM. For the year -1 auction, for 2-hour battery, which is the most standard battery we see to participate in these services, it's 27%. And it can increase up to around 50% depending on the capacity that you have. So typically up to 4-hour battery. We've not seen many other types of batteries on the market yet. So yes, overall between 25 and 50% depending on the auction, because these derating factors can change and depending on the capacity of your battery.
Maybe if I can add in on that, Jules, I saw that Luc also asked what's the derating factor actually, what's the meaning of it or the why it's there. So Luc, you suggested it is a way to control participants' type and control the merit order. I see it more as a way of reflecting how long technology can stand on its own or provide electricity to the system on its own. So you will see that, for example, solar panels will have a very low derating factor because they are not there 24/7, whereas a gas-fired power plant will mostly have a very high derating factor because you can really rely on it 24/7. That's a bit what the derating factor is trying to reflect.
Yes, and if I answer another question from Luc, thank you for your participation, active participation in this. So you ask if participating in CRM excludes trading in imbalance, although AFR energy is still communable. So no, this does not exclude any participation in other markets, either capacity markets or energy markets. It's just each time a flow chart to be followed to understand which signals you should participate to in order to follow all the requirements for the different imbalance or AFR or CRM revenues that you need to follow. but it's clearly most amount of the time the batteries, for example, would still participate in either imbalance or AFR if they are in CRM.
I saw that Charlotte asked another question. When the strike price is reached in day ahead, should the whole capacity of your asset be reserved during the period of the strike price, or can the asset participate in other markets? Good question. So you are still very much free to participate in day ahead markets and in other markets. It's just that your capacity should be participating in a market, that market being day ahead, imbalance, intraday, and so on. And that you should activate if the activation price is above your declared market price. You could, in theory, put a very high activation price and then never be activated, but that is subject to investigation by Veolia and the CREG. So you just want to participate as you usually would. Also, there's really no incentive for you not to participate, because then you do not gain revenues in these markets. So let's say you typically participate in day ahead, you have a strike price of 100 euros, the day ahead price goes to 400, you will earn these 300 euros on top of your strike price. So yes, you can still participate in other markets.
Maybe to add on that, Pierre, as we showed in the slides previously as well, it's even like this, that when you already participate in ancillary services like FCR, AFR, MFR, and you are selected in one of those services on the daily auctions, then you can combine the revenues of CRM and these ancillary markets, but your obligation will only be for the ancillary markets. So you will earn the CRM revenue, but you only have to answer to the FCR, AFR, or MFR, depending on which one you are active on.
Yeah, and maybe to answer another question from Luc that's related, that said that these remunerations in CRM are barely covering the cost of the BESS system. So because of the CRM is an additional revenue stream for these assets, well, typically BESS, so batteries would participate in a lot of different spot and ancillary services. It's not seen as really a requirement and a missing money issue that the CRM should cover for batteries. And also the CRM is supposed to be technology agnostic, so just to cover any types of assets that would help the Belgian grids to have security. And therefore, there is not a distinction between types of assets that are or not in the money for this. However, really to conclude on this subject, the batteries, for batteries, it's still an additional revenues, and for other assets, it's also an additional revenues that's really interesting for assets that are existing or even new, and that should be taken for any asset owners that want to make sure that their business model is working at the best. Now, I'll try to select. There's a lot of questions. Thank you for all of these. I'll take one by Stein. How come the derating factor for a BESS is relatively low in comparison to others? It's mainly linked to the fact that a BESS, so a battery, has a limited capacity, so it's a limited energy reservoir, and therefore, if it happened that the strike price were activated for a while or caused an activation that's required for national security of supply for a long time, that this system was empty, so the battery would start activating, and then after 2 hours or after a certain period, this capacity is empty, and therefore is not reliable as a security asset, and therefore it's less compensated by the CRM system. Whereas gas turbine or emergency generator with a big enough tank in diesel can usually last for longer, up to 12 hours usually we see, but sometimes even more. If you stop consuming as a consumption asset, for example, it can last for a really long time, of course. And these are better remunerated because they can better participate to help the national grid.
Yeah, and then maybe another question from Luc. Good questions. You provide cover for the trading. It means Flexcity is an energy provider as well. No. Just to make sure that there's no misunderstanding here, what we do is we cover these obligations. So with Flexcity, we have a whole portfolio, and we also have some additional volume that we can trade on this through a secondary market deal on the CRM market, so to say. So we can transfer obligations between assets which for some reason might not be available. So let's say your battery is out during these critical moments, you will be subject to a penalty. That penalty is deducted from your subsidy. Just a note here, you can never be penalized more than your total subsidy. So it's in nowhere a commitment that you will
lose money
on participation. But what we cover essentially is moments of unavailabilities with other assets in which we can switch within our portfolio, such that you are not penalized during these moments. I hope that clears it up.
And there is another question. This one is from Christophe. So the question is, a future asset, so a non-existing one, on permit request has no choice to bid other than year -4. So maybe this, Pierre, like if you are building a new asset, can you only participate in year -4, or is year -1 or 2 also available?
Yes, no, in theory you can participate in each auction, but of course there's a bit more risk pertain if you participate in the year -1. Typically what we see with batteries, what we see is what we expect, because it's the first year -2 auction, that batteries will participate in the year -2 auction and that they will expect to have a permit in a year or so well before the delivery period itself. But the nature of it, of like having a difficult permitting process and so forth, is typically more for the year -4 period. That's true, yeah.
And maybe a related question for a BESS system. Is it better to put it to the CRM if it's front of the meter or behind the meter? My understanding is that you can do both, but maybe Pierre, you can confirm.
You can do both, indeed. That does not make a difference towards CRM. It does make a difference in terms of grid tariffs that you'll have to pay, but that's another discussion and on which we can go more into detail with in person, but that's out of scope for this Q&A.
And I'll take a last question, also from Luc. How long does a pre-qualification takes in months? So I want to take this one because I really want to make sure that you don't underestimate the time it takes to gather documents and to make sure that everything is set to participate for the pre-qualification. That is on the 15th of June. Usually it's about 1 month to 1.5 months, but of course there is sometimes requirements from third parties like your administration or your local entities that have to validate some documents. So it's not as like science to know exactly how long it takes. We see between 1 and 2 months usually for assets to be sure that they've got all the documents required, but it depends, of course. So please have a look at this and don't hesitate to contact us to check what you need exactly. And if you want to participate, if you want to come with Flexcity, we can, of course, help. This concludes this webinar. Thank you very much, Pierre and Lynn, for participating and explaining everything. To everyone, thank you very much for your participation and your questions. Don't hesitate, once again, to contact us, and we'll be happy to help you for your CRM opportunities. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.